Nothing grows here. Why even try? Because someone has to. The wasteland stretched for miles in every direction, a vast expanse of cracked earth and pale dust. Once it had been a valley, green and living. Now the wind carried only whispers of the world that was. When the last supply trucks rolled away and the townsfolk packed up, Mara stayed behind. She stood in the emptiness, holding a single bag of seeds and an old shovel, the sky overhead scorched and colorless. Neighbors had laughed as they left. Nothing grows here, Mara. The rain won't return. She nodded, feeling the ache of goodbye, but something deeper rooted her in place. Mara pressed her palm to the ground. It was hot, unyielding, but she remembered her grandmother's stories. Of forests rising where deserts once reigned, of hope planted seed by seed. So on the first day of her new life, Mara dug a hole. She placed a single acacia seed in the dust, whispered a promise to the wind, and watered it with the last of her drinking water. Survival was a battle of patience. Mara scavenged the abandoned town for tools, old irrigation pipes, and scraps of tarp to shade her sapling. Each morning she watched for any sign of green, her heart leaping at every glimmer of hope. Dust storms came, scouring the land. She built windbreaks from broken fence posts and stacked stones to catch any moisture that fell at night. Her hands blistered, skin burnt and raw, but she worked until the moon rose high. Sometimes, Mara's only company was the shriek of a crow or the scuttle of beetles beneath the ruins. She kept a journal, sketching each step, recording the days with simple truths. Planted 5 seeds today. 2 were taken by the wind. The rain was rare, a brief, precious blessing that she caught in every tin and jar she could find. Seasons shifted. Mara's hair grew wild, her skin weathered like the stones. A single sapling broke through the dust, its leaves trembling in the dawn. Mara wept, hands in the dirt, cradling the first life she had coaxed from the wasteland. Word began to spread. A traveler passing through saw the tree and returned to the nearest settlement with the story. There's a woman alone in the dust, planting trees. One is growing. Some called it a miracle. Others, a waste of time. But Mara kept planting. She traded a handmade broom for a bucket, a poem for a tattered sack of seeds. Sometimes, a stranger left a bottle of water or a bundle of cuttings at the edge of her camp, and she thanked them in the morning with a nod. The wasteland, for the first time in years, was no longer silent. Every tree that survived brought new hope. Mara experimented with every trick she could recall or invent. She wrapped the trunks with cloth to shield them from wind, mulched the roots with straw salvaged from abandoned barns, and planted drought-hardy grasses in rings to hold the soil. Sometimes she lost whole rows to heat, wind, or burrowing pests. She mourned each one, then saved what she could. Root cuttings, a handful of leaves, a memory in her journal. Children from a distant town came to see the tree woman. They asked questions, gathered fallen seeds, and carried news of Mara's stubborn orchard to their families. One boy returned with his father, offering an old wheelbarrow and a battered rain barrel. Others brought sacks of compost, cracked clay pots, and jars full of hope. For every setback, a new face or small gift arrived. The forest, if it could yet be called that, began to look less like a miracle and more like a promise. The community grew quietly around Mara's vision. A young teacher pitched a tent nearby, determined to teach reading beneath the shade of Mara's first acacia. A carpenter built benches from scrap wood. A potter left water jugs by the well. As roots spread beneath the ground, friendships grew above it. They pooled water, collected rain, and built a windmill to pump from the deep, cold aquifer. Mara, once alone, now listened to laughter, stories, and the scraping of children's shoes through dust. She taught everyone what she'd learned, refusing to let pride get in the way of progress. Each evening, they gathered to sing old songs and plan for the next planting. The wasteland's silence gave way to the gentle rustle of leaves. But hope always brings challenge. A season of unbroken drought arrived. Rivers shrank and the wind carried nothing but heat and despair. Some families left, afraid the forest dream would die. Mara watched them go with a heavy heart but kept working. She and the ones who stayed rigged shade tents, dug deeper wells, and rationed water with ruthless care. Crows pecked at the youngest saplings. One night, a fire, set by lightning, roared through the western edge of the grove. Mara fought the flames alongside her friends, beating at the sparks with wet burlap and hauling buckets until her arms shook. When the smoke cleared, Dozens of young trees were gone. Yet, in the charred ground, Mara found tiny shoots already pushing through. She knelt, weeping, and pressed her hand to the earth. "We'll start again." After the fire, the work changed. Mara and her friends became not just planters, but healers, restoring soil, grafting new branches onto scorched trunks, and building barriers to protect the fragile green. They hauled manure from distant farms, mixed charcoal into the earth, and planted wildflowers alongside the trees to bring back bees. The children, no longer shy, invented games among the stumps and helped scatter seeds after every rain. An old botanist arrived, offering advice and rare seeds tucked into yellowed envelopes. He walked the groves with Mara, pointing out signs of health and danger. "Your roots are deep," he said, touching a sapling. "So are you." Word spread further. Traders began passing through, leaving barrels of water or packets of seed in exchange for fruit or a night in the shade. For the first time, birds nested in the tallest branches. Seasons passed, and the forest became a landmark. Maps were redrawn to mark the green patch on the wasteland. Travelers stopped to rest, share stories, and help with the work. A midwife set up a tent to care for expectant mothers. A craftsman built a communal kitchen from clay and stone, and a storyteller began gathering each dusk, spinning tales for all who would listen. Mara learned from everyone: how to weave willow fences, how to read the weather by the taste of the air, how to let others take the lead. Children grew, trees grew, and roots bound the community together. Each planting season ended with a festival under the acacias, candles glowing among the leaves, music and laughter echoing where once there had been only wind. Hardship never vanished, but hope multiplied. One year, locusts descended, clouds so thick they blotted out the sun. Crops and leaves vanished overnight. Mara and her people mourned the loss, but rallied. They caught and cooked the insects, dug up wild tubers, and shared every scrap until the worst had passed. In the locusts' wake, Mara saw something miraculous. Where they'd eaten the old leaves, new shoots sprouted even thicker. The trees somehow stronger for having survived. A biologist passing through explained, "You've created a living system, resilient, always adapting." Mara smiled, watching the wind move through the branches, and understood for the first time. They weren't fighting the wasteland anymore. They were part of it, and it was changing with them. The forest grew into legend. Travelers from distant cities arrived, curious about the green oasis born from dust. Scholars came to study the ecosystem, sketching trees and counting insects. Artists painted the colors of sunrise through the leaves, while musicians wrote songs about hope blooming from despair. A council formed, elected from every family and trade, ensuring that water, land, and harvests were shared fairly. Mara, once the lone planter, now found herself listening more than speaking. She let the younger generation lead reforestation drives, teach visiting children, and dream bigger than she ever had. They planted fruit orchards beyond the original grove, experimented with drought-proof grains, and sent out seeds and advice to neighboring villages hoping to grow their own forests. What began as survival became transformation. Yet new threats emerged with growth. A distant government, hearing of the forest's success, sent surveyors and officials with promises and warnings. Some spoke of taxes and rules, others of roads and development. Debates echoed beneath the trees. Should they accept help and risk losing control? Would new roads bring prosperity or destruction? Mara urged caution and unity. "We built this together. Don't let anyone divide us now." The council decided they would welcome honest visitors and share knowledge, but would resist any effort to fence, sell, or exploit the land for profit. The forest remained open, its strength found not in walls, but in trust. Time passed, and the forest grew old and wise. Weddings were celebrated under its shade, children learned to walk on its soft earth, and elders found peace among the wildflowers. Mara, her hair silver and her back bent, walked the path she had once carved alone. She greeted every new seedling, listened to every new song. Her greatest joy was seeing the forest survive on its own. Birds spreading seeds, rain filling ponds, and young people tending the trees as if they were family. On the anniversary of her first planting, the entire community gathered beneath the oldest acacia. Children recited stories of how the forest began, and Mara, voice trembling but strong, said simply, "We planted hope. It grew." The forest's reputation reached beyond borders. Delegations from parched towns and foreign cities arrived to see the miracle. Scientists exchanged seeds, bringing back new varieties that thrived in heat and drought. A filmmaker made a documentary watched across continents, The Woman Who Planted Hope. Donations and letters poured in from far away. Requests for guidance, gifts of tools, and stories from people starting their own green revolutions. Mara became a symbol, but she remained rooted in daily work, teaching children, planting saplings, and tending to the soil. The council expanded, welcoming new voices and ideas, making sure the land was never claimed by a single hand or ruled by outside interests. The forest, once a tiny miracle, was now a movement. Challenges returned with each season. A severe drought tested every root and heart. Water became precious, and the council enforced strict rationing. Mara rallied the people with old wisdom. Deep roots survived the longest drought. They recycled every drop, shaded seedlings with woven cloth, and built new cisterns to capture the rare rains. Some trees died, but others dug deep and survived. A traveling engineer designed a fog net to harvest water from the morning mist, each drop a lifeline. The forest endured, a testament to resilience and ingenuity. Mara aged, but her purpose never faded. She wrote letters to distant communities, sharing what had been learned, warning about mistakes, and celebrating success. When a sandstorm threatened to bury the youngest orchard, Mara joined the effort to build windbreaks and replant. Afterward, she sat under her favorite tree with a grandchild and said, "We don't own the forest. We care for it so it can care for us." The annual festival grew to welcome guests from across the land. Lanterns glowed in the trees, music carried on the breeze, and stories of the forest's beginning were told in 100 different ways. Through hardship and celebration, Mara's vision lived on, rooted deeper than any drought, spreading farther than she'd ever dreamed. Years turned into decades, and the forest continued to shape the world around it. The community grew into a vibrant town, houses shaded by green canopies, schools and clinics built from living walls of willow and bamboo, and roads paved with crushed seeds and memory. Migratory birds arrived by the thousands each spring, their calls filling the dawn. Mara became known as the Mother of the Forest, her story taught in schools across the region. She mentored leaders from distant lands, hosting them beneath the ancient acacia and sharing not only techniques, but the deeper lesson of patience and hope. Disputes arose from time to time over water, boundaries, or how to share the ever-increasing harvest. But the council, remembering Mara's quiet example, resolved each with open debate and compromise. A network of green outposts sprang up, all inspired by the original grove, each one tailored to the needs of its people, each one honoring the spirit of planting against all odds. On Mara's 80th birthday, a celebration was held beneath the stars. Friends and strangers gathered from far and wide, carrying saplings and songs. Mara, frail but smiling, listened to speeches, watched children dance, and finally stood to speak. Nothing grows unless someone tries. We are all seeds, waiting for a little hope, a little water, and the promise of tomorrow. That night, 1,000 lanterns floated into the sky, drifting above the trees that had once been impossible. Mara's last years were peaceful and full of meaning. She rose each morning to walk through the oldest groves, greeted by the birds and squirrels she'd made a home for. She visited classrooms, sharing stories with children whose great-grandparents had once doubted anything could ever live here. The council sought her advice on new challenges, disease among the pines, rumors of development, or changes in weather. Mara listened, then guided with her steady wisdom. Protect the roots, and the leaves will care for themselves. A great drought struck the land again, harsher than any before. Mara helped organize water shares and led the planting of deep-rooted trees that could outlast even the harshest summers. One evening, as the air cooled and shadows lengthened, Mara sat beneath the original acacia, her journal open, pen in hand. She wrote, "I will not live forever, but the forest will, if you let it. Listen to the earth, care for each other, plant hope." She passed that night quietly, surrounded by friends, her legacy already growing in every seed. Long after Mara was gone, her story lived on in root and branch, song and shadow. The forest became a symbol of resilience across continents, visited by scientists, pilgrims, and those who had lost everything except hope. Festivals marked the planting season, And every year on the anniversary of Mara's first seed, the community planted thousands more, their hands guided by her memory. Children learned to read by tracing letters on smooth acacia bark. Elders told newcomers, "This is the place where someone tried, and everything changed." The council, now generations strong, met beneath the ancient trees, solving problems and planning for a future ever greener. On the tallest hill where the first sapling had grown, a simple plaque read, "Nothing grows here. Why even try?" Because someone has to. And so, in the heart of the wasteland, a forest thrived, rooted in hope, watered by courage, and forever growing toward the light.